another International Women's Day. But sitting next to me is not just another woman. She happens to be Pallavi Jha, Managing Director of Walchand PeopleFirst, which also owns the global brand of Dale Carnegie. Incidentally, I happen to be her husband, so that puts me in a pretty tight spot during this conversation. And Pallavi, as they say, behind every successful woman stands a man.
Well, I have to acknowledge that's true because he's not just my life partner, but he's also my business partner.
Mm-hmm. And doesn't just stand behind her, but sits by her side as well. One of the rare opportunities where I guess I will be doing the talking and probably grilling her with some tough questions. So let's start and get the ball rolling. Pallavi, you have done a lot of these International Women's Day conversations. So let's cut to the chase. What has really changed since you really began to sit in the driver's seat?
Well, we're talking about spanning almost 2 decades right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in many ways a lot has changed, and in many ways it hasn't changed much at all. And I will tell you what I mean. What was kosher and okay and people got away with 20 years ago, I think there's a lot more awareness today, thanks to the various types of regulations. There is the Me Too movements, there's a lot of self-awareness amongst women as well as men and organizations at large. But we have to admit that at the end of the day, the metrics, the bottom line hasn't shifted much. We don't see as many women at the top as we would have liked to see. We're still inching only incrementally, if at all. And unfortunately in India, we've had a declining gender participation in the labor force. So that is really a one step backwards.
Yeah, that is a truly disturbing trend. And for a lot of people who don't know, in the recent surveys, women are actually dropping off from even trying to look for a job. Which raises a very fundamental question, that you had an advantage that you did not have to look for a job because you came from a very well-known business family, although you worked in the private sector on your own earlier. But having been part of a largely patriarchal setup, very male-dominated, why you? I mean, why did you succeed in that enterprise? I mean, how did you make that breakthrough? A very quick recap there.
So, well, let me clarify first is I started off like anybody else. I graduated, I did my management, I joined a private sector global company, and I would have had that career. That said, though, there was an opportunity in the family business where I decided that for various reasons, I wanted to stake a claim. And as you mentioned rightly, it was patriarchal. Daughters were not allowed to do so at that time. But I kind of, decided to stand up and get counted. And I think what came forward was much more than I bargained for. There was initially, we'll look after your interests, but stay out of this. Then they saw me being a little serious. Then the stakes increased. The usual situations that women feel and experience during, interacting in the workplaces, largely bullying, sexual harassment, networking, social networking in the evenings. All of that actually was part of this fight to be counted in the family business. And the more objections I saw, the more
made you tougher.
Yeah, it just made my resolve even stronger. At some stage, I think what happened, and I said this is almost 20 years ago, I wasn't even aware that some of these things were happening. Today, with a lot more culture awareness, a lot more understanding of our rights and what's right and what's wrong, I think I realized what many things that happened then. I wasn't even aware of the fact that I was a victim of many of those situations.
So, somewhere down the line, since I saw you go through those personal battles, a lot of it, obviously, hopefully one day when you write a book, you might mention that. But you went through some very tough trials and tribulations, as they call it. But it's fascinating that, you come from a business family that made India's infrastructure story happen. And today you lead a soft powered infrastructure in the form of Dale Carnegie. So a question for you. How do you rate yourself in terms of, now that, you've been an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur over the last 2 decades now, how do you rate yourself in terms of empowering women at the workplace? I mean, do you think you've done enough? Do you think you need to do a lot more?
So the wonderful part about the fact is, being a woman, having gone through the journey myself, I feel that I understand closely what women go through, right? And we've been conscious about making sure that those situations don't arise in our workplace. Having said that, one of the big fundamentals that we followed is really not to be gender sensitive at all. So whether you're a man or whether you're a woman, we pretty much have similar policies. And the beauty of it is that women have risen to the top with their natural talent.
So you're rating yourself pretty good. I think the company has been able to put women on challenging assignments that they've done well.
Absolutely. I think the issue has just been about being empathetic towards one and all, and that includes the women, and not just being sympathetic and compassionate and indulgent with women, but just purely being empathetic and enabling them. That's what's helped.
So basically, you're letting merit be the preponderant.
Enabling merit to find its potential.
Okay. All right. So which raises the next question. I'm on the board with you of the company. Now, you're surrounded by 4 men. I mean, all of them are good. I mean, I'm not talking about myself. Very, very good people. You are the lone woman. So why has Pallavi Jha not been able to bring more women onto the board as part of the larger diversity plan? What's holding you back there?
So, the answer to that question, but I guess this is for sharing with everybody, is one is, I am the only woman on the board, not because there's a regulation in the country, but because that's how it was. I happen to be there by merit.
Yep.
Happened to be on other boards earlier, which was also, I think, at a time when I was the only woman on those boards at the time. We did bring in another woman director on the board.
Sure.
There were some particular professional circumstances where she had to get off the board because she was pursuing a different career. And I think we will soon be the next board inductee will have to be a woman.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So you're biting the bullet, huh? You're taking the bull by the horns, and that's the way it ought to be, right? Because I mean, ultimately, I think you should feel very proud. It's a small company, but it's got very high standards of corporate governance.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to the larger point. You answered all the corporate questions very well, but how do you see this in the larger ecosystem of India? You see, my question is that the corporate sector, industry, businesses is a critical component. But when you look at India as a whole, I mean, how do you see gender gap issues there? I mean, the data is depressing. I mean, people know about the violence against women. It's all over the country. A lot of it is not even reported. Are you somewhere depressed about it, or are you hopeful?
As an individual, I don't allow myself to get depressed about anything. So I will remain optimistic and hopeful at all times. There are obviously, for everything that looks like it's not going right, there are islands of excellence, of examples and role models that always give us hope. And I think India has many of those. So I think what we've got to see is that I think the larger ecosystem does need to change, does need to improve. And I think based on my understanding and being part of a lot of women's groups and women's initiatives, and the one singular factor that changes everything is regulation. And I think there are lots of laws that have been created, whether it's maternity leaves, paternity leaves, whether it is POSH, whether it is providing creches at the workplace and things like that, that have enabled organizations to become compliant if they were not willing to be doing so on their own. And that's brought about a greater degree of change. Frankly, even the fact that you've got to have one woman director and now even
it's a beginning. It's a beginning.
One independent woman director is a beginning and a good thing. So now that the opportunities get created for us, I think now it's for the women to seize them with both hands and make the difference.
Yeah, they should. Why not? And because you keep hearing about the same names. every time there's a talk about women role models, the same name. But bottom line, do you really feel the glass ceiling has been broken? I keep hearing about this glass ceiling is the most overused, hackneyed term in this entire discussion every year, every time. Do you think it's been broken or it still exists? Because, in the corporate world, they talk about these 3 M's, marriage, maternity, and mobility, etc., etc. Bottom line, have things really changed, or do you still see it's a long uphill climb?
Given the short answer is that it exists. And given the pace of change that we've seen over the last couple of decades, I would say it'll exist for another 100 years. And we've got to understand
it's an attitudinal issue, really.
I think it's fundamental. For me, I personally believe it's a matter of fewer opportunities than incumbents. So when there are fewer opportunities and both men and women are competing for the same opportunities, you will find that the fight gets tougher. And fewer women want to fight that tough fight because they may be wanting a different balance in life. And for the ambitious ones, I think they root in and sometimes lose out because of the stereotypes.
So I'm going to ask you something, probably which has been debated and talked about, but your personal experience on it. The pandemic has been brutal. The workplace has changed. Many of us have not gone back to the office regularly at all, working from home. Do you feel working from home, because the normal complaint has been that men don't help. Men don't help with the diapers, they don't help with the kitchen, and they're terrible at household chores. They're a disaster anyway. But do you believe the work from home will democratize the gender gap to some extent? Because now you can both appreciate the challenges, the predicament, and probably get more empathetic.
Yes, so theoretically that sounds right. And there was a lot of expectation that more and more women, there is no boundaries, there is gig work, there's flexibility, there's work from home, so that women should be able to get back to work or stay in work without dropping off. But what we also realized that the chores at home, it just became that you not only needed to look at your career when your child was away, but your career and child are at home together. Your husband is at home together. Maybe your mother-in-law is at home together. You're doing all the roles that that classic stereotypical photograph of a woman with 10 hands. It really just got exacerbated during the pandemic. So I think that's the reason why you see actually a lot of women who opted to not continue in their jobs. So that's where you see the declining trend in the labor force participation as well. Compounded with the fact that the job opportunities have declined.
And the job market is down.
And therefore, the general belief being that the men are the breadwinners, and therefore they will go for the job, and the woman will sit at home and manage everything else with the 10 hands minus one that's related to work.
Yeah, and I think so. But maybe a good time here to Pallavi also kind of bite the bullet on something that we need to face. I mean, you talk about women role models, but there have been some controversial women CEOs in India of late. Somewhere down the line, take the shine off.
Yeah. So it's like if I tell you there's a CEO with a scam, in your mind you will think of a man, right? And that's another gender bias and gender stereotype. So I think the only realization here is biases work on both sides. You have biases that are against you, and then there are biases that are put in your favor, saying, oh, women are more sincere, and women have greater integrity, and women are more kind, and women are more nurturing. And I don't know whether they're general rules. A stereotype is a stereotype. But the reality is that if you want to break biases, break them on all sides, and accept the fact that people are people, and some will have a different level and a capability and talent, attitude and value set, and some people will be different. And as you see cases happening, that's what this is all about.
Point, which brings me to the question on men. because the whole, and this is the last question, how do you see the role of men? Because I think they say the only time that a woman really successfully changes a man is when he's a baby, right? But jokes aside, men are a very critical cornerstone of this entire women's revolution. How do you see that play out? And please don't let out any skeletons in the cover.
So I'm only going to say one thing, is that for women to understand that their success, like for any man, is never a story that nobody's an island unto themselves, and they never become successful all by themselves, in and of themselves. Men and women need co-conspirators, cheerleaders, partners, mentors, the whole village in a sense for your success, right?
Yeah.
And I think women make that mistake. Women try to fight that battle alone.
Right.
To enlist the support of different people is part of the job. So choose well. I did. So if there's any advice for men, I think maybe you're better off giving it, because you did a great job.
Well, I can tell you something. The first thing you can do is to listen to your better halves and listen to the women more. But if you have to give any input, in short, to the girls, to the women, whoever they are, urban India, rural India, what's the one thing you would like to tell them?
The one thing I would like to say is what Mahatma Gandhi said, is be the change you would like to see. And therefore, don't try to change the world, and don't wait for the world to change so that it paves the way for you. I would say that you should just find yourself, know what you want, have the conviction, and stay the course. And your own actions and your own attitudes and your own behaviors will make sure that the world, the universe will conspire for your success.
And I can tell you, walking the talk, and I think the example that Pallavi mentioned about making the change happen on your own without waiting for the world to change it for you, whether it's government, regulation, or even your company, that can be a great start. Thank you very much, Pallavi. Wonderful having this.
All the best, break the bias, and enjoy yourselves.